had a heart for mobilizing and networking churches together to take on kind of the big, large systemic issues. So it was like, what are the issues out there that no one church or organization can take on alone? And foster care was the one that just kept coming to the surface. So I found myself at a meeting with Department of Human Services officials, so OKDHS. And the agenda that day was to kind of honestly assess the needs surrounding the foster care issue. And in that meeting in December 2010, Mark, the COO, he looked over at Deb, the head of child welfare, and he said, how many more foster families do we need statewide? And she estimated that day that we needed as many as 1,500 more foster families in the state of Oklahoma than we currently had. And they looked at us and they said, we as the Department of Human Services, the state of Oklahoma, we feel like the faith community is the solution to the problems and the issues surrounding foster care. And so they essentially said, will you help us? We've got the kids, will you bring these families to the table? You know, right now in our country, right here in the United States, there are 408,000 boys and girls that are in the foster care system. Of those 408,000, we know that 107,000 of those boys and girls are quote-unquote adoptable, meaning the parental rights have either been terminated or relinquished, and to be honest, they're never going home. So if they're never going home, you know, there's a couple options. You know, they're either going to remain and kind of languish in foster care. They're going to be adopted and placed into what many call a forever family, or they're going to age out of foster care at 18. What we know about young men and women who age out of foster care is they do not fare well in society. Last year in our country, 27,000 young men and women aged out of foster care. So they're experiencing incarceration, addiction, homelessness, joblessness, and death at much higher rates than any other group. And they have no sense of place, no belonging, and they're not a part of a family. There's this idea that Nelson Mandela shares, and he says, there is no keener revelation of the condition of a society than the way in which it treats its children. We have a major, major problem. And with all seriousness, I would say that this is very much an emergency. 250 kiddos every night will spend the night in a shelter, and they will call a shelter home. I can't help but think of this scripture, Psalm 68, 5 and 6. It says who God is, and it says, Father to the fatherless, defender of widows, he sets the lonely in families. Now, what it doesn't say is like, God sets the lonely in shelters. The only reason that these boys and girls will spend a single night in one of these shelters is because there are not enough foster families who are prepared and ready, willing, and able to welcome them into their heart and into their home. I spent a couple hours with two kids in particular last week. One was his name was Edward. He's 3. Another little guy, his name was Noah. He's 2 years old, and I sat and I held and I rocked this little 2-year-old Noah as he cried for his Bubba. He's been crying for his brother, his Bubba, for days and days and days, because families are being torn apart, sibling groups are being separated, and these little guys are calling a shelter that's run by the government, that's home, that's family, and it's just not right. So our response to all of this, to this foster care crisis, is something that we call the 111 Project. It originated in that room in December 2010 when DHS came to us and they said, people of God, church, faith community, will you help us? So for the past year and a half, we've been working to mobilize the church on behalf of kids in foster care. And so when we talk about 111, what that stands for is one church, one family, one purpose. There are 6,100 churches in the state of Oklahoma. So very realistically, if every church will commit at least one family for one purpose, then we can leave no Oklahoma child without a family. There's this idea from this guy Victor Hugo, and he says there's nothing so powerful as an idea whose time has come. And I believe that the local and universal church changing the face of foster care is an idea whose time has come.